The text message lit up my phone like a warning flare in the night. "Leave now. Don't talk to anyone." My fingers trembled as I stared at the anonymous number, the sounds of my son's backyard barbecue suddenly distant and hollow. At 65, I'd become skilled at being politely invisible during these family gatherings. But this message made my heart pound with an urgency I hadn't felt since my husband Richard died 3 years ago. Something was terribly wrong in my son's picture-perfect suburban Richmond home, and somehow someone knew it. The summer heat in Virginia was unforgiving that afternoon. I stood clutching a sweating glass of iced tea that I hadn't taken a single sip from, watching my daughter-in-law Camilla orchestrate the event with her usual controlled precision. Everything about Camilla was flawless. From her expertly highlighted blonde hair to her carefully curated social media presence showcasing their perfect family life. Even the way she subtly undermined me seemed rehearsed, designed to make me question my own relevance in my son's life. "Helena, wouldn't you be more comfortable in the shade?" Camilla's voice cut through my thoughts. She never called me Mom or even Mrs. Daniels, just Helena, as if we were distant acquaintances who happened to share family gatherings every few months. "I'm fine here, thank you," I replied, offering the practiced smile I'd worn since becoming a widow. A smile that said I was coping, that I didn't need anyone's concern or, God forbid, pity. Camilla nodded curtly before turning her attention to her guests, mostly her friends and colleagues whom I barely knew. I watched my son Marcos across the yard, proudly grilling steaks and laughing with his friends, oblivious to the tension that always simmered between his wife and mother. My 3 grandchildren, Emma, Lucas, and little Sophie, splashed in the small pool in the corner of the manicured lawn, their laughter a brief respite from my growing anxiety. I glanced down at my phone again. The message remained, its urgency undeniable. My instinct was to dismiss it as a wrong number, yet something about it felt disturbingly personal. I scrolled through my recent calls and messages, searching for clues. Nothing unusual, except perhaps the increased frequency of calls from unknown numbers that I'd been ignoring lately, assuming they were telemarketers. Another message appeared. "This is not a joke. The police are coming. You don't want to be there when they arrive." My mouth went dry. Police? What could possibly bring police to my son's upscale neighborhood barbecue? My first thought was for my grandchildren. Were they in danger? Was someone threatening my family? I looked around the backyard with new eyes, trying to spot anything unusual. The guests all seemed relaxed, drinking their craft beers and designer cocktails, laughing at inside jokes I wasn't privy to. Camilla flitted between groups, the perfect hostess in her linen sundress and designer sandals. Everything seemed normal, except for the weight of the phone in my hand and the dread pooling in my stomach. I made my way toward Marcos, who was flipping burgers on the grill, a beer tucked in the crook of his arm. "Honey, can I speak with you for a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, Mom. Just let me finish these patties. Camilla likes them just so." He winked at me, as if we shared an understanding about his wife's perfectionism. We didn't. There was a time when Marcos and I could read each other's thoughts, when I was his first confidant. That was before Camilla, before I became the bothersome widow who didn't quite fit into their curated life. "It's important," I insisted, showing him my phone. "I just received these strange messages." Marcos frowned, taking the phone from my hands. "Probably just a wrong number, Mom. Or one of those scams targeting seniors. You know how they are." The dismissal stung, but it wasn't unexpected. Since Richard's death, my concerns were often attributed to anxiety or confusion. I was no longer the capable woman who had helped run a successful accounting business with my late husband. Now I was just an aging widow who needed reassurance. "I don't think so," I said firmly. "It feels targeted." Marcos handed back my phone and patted my shoulder. "Try not to worry. We're having a good time here. Why don't you go talk to Barbara? She was asking about you earlier." Barbara was Camilla's mother, a woman who regarded me with the same polite disinterest as her daughter. The last thing I wanted was to make small talk with her, while my instincts screamed that something was wrong. A third message appeared. "There's a cafe 2 blocks east, the Corner Cup. Meet me there in 10 minutes if you want to know why your daughter-in-law has been stealing your identity." The words hit me like a physical blow. Identity theft? Camilla? It seemed absurd. Yet a small voice inside me whispered that it would explain the strange credit card offers that had been showing up in my mail, addressed to me, but for accounts I'd never opened. It would explain the odd phone calls from collection agencies that I'd dismissed as mistakes. I looked across the yard at Camilla, who was now taking photos of the perfectly arranged dessert table for what would undoubtedly become an Instagram post later. Was it possible that behind that polished exterior lurked someone capable of such betrayal? Someone who would steal from her husband's mother? My phone buzzed again. I have proof. Come now or regret it later. I made my decision in that moment. Whatever was happening, I needed to know. I'd spent 3 years being sidelined in my own family, watching as Camilla gradually positioned herself between Marcos and me. I told myself it was natural, that my son had his own life now. But what if there was more to it? What if her efforts to isolate me had a more sinister purpose? I approached Marcos again, this time with my purse already on my shoulder. I'm not feeling well. I think I'll head home early. Concern briefly flickered across his face. Are you sure? Do you want me to drive you? No, it's just a headache. The heat, probably. I'll take a rideshare. Don't disrupt the party. I forced another smile. At least say goodbye to the kids, he insisted. I nodded, making my way to the pool where my grandchildren played. I hugged each of them, holding on perhaps a little longer than usual, inhaling the scent of sunscreen and chlorine on their warm skin. Grandma has to go home, but I'll see you very soon, I promised, my voice thick with emotion I couldn't explain to them. But you'll miss the fireworks, 8-year-old Lucas protested, referring to the sparklers Marcos had planned for after dark. I'll see them next time, I assured him, brushing wet hair from his forehead. As I straightened up, I caught Camilla watching me from across the yard, her expression unreadable. Did I imagine the flicker of suspicion in her eyes? I waved casually in her direction and began making my way toward the side gate, avoiding the house and the rest of the guests. Leaving so soon, Helena? Camilla's voice stopped me just as I reached the gate. I turned, finding her standing closer than I expected, her perfect smile not quite reaching her eyes. Migraine, I explained simply. Better to catch it early. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. You seem upset. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I lied, wondering if she could hear my heart pounding. Just need my medication. Let me call you a car, she offered, already reaching for her phone. I've already ordered one, I said quickly. It should be here any minute. Camilla nodded slowly. Feel better then. I'll have Marcos check on you later. No need to bother him. I'll call tomorrow. I pushed open the gate, desperate to escape her scrutiny. As I walked down the sidewalk of the upscale neighborhood, past identical 2-story colonials with manicured lawns, my phone buzzed again. Are you coming? I typed back with shaking fingers. On my way. The Corner Cup Cafe was exactly 2 blocks east, just as the mysterious texter had said. It was a small, independent coffee shop that I'd passed many times when visiting Marcos, but had never entered. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside, the cool air conditioning a relief after the humid July heat. The cafe was nearly empty at this odd hour between lunch and dinner. A barista looked up from wiping down the counter, and a young couple sat in a corner, absorbed in their laptops. In the furthest booth, a woman with dark hair cut in a sleek bob raised her hand slightly, catching my attention. As I approached, I realized I recognized her. Diana Porter. She had been at several of Camilla's dinner parties over the years, introduced as a business associate from the real estate firm where Camilla worked as a marketing director. Diana had always been polite, but distant, much like the rest of Camilla's carefully curated social circle. Helena, she greeted me, gesturing to the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. You're behind those messages? I asked, remaining standing. Why all the mystery? And what's this about Camilla stealing my identity? Diana glanced around the cafe before responding. You should sit down. What I'm about to tell you isn't going to be easy to hear. Something in her tone made me comply. I slid into the booth, placing my purse beside me, my hand still clutching my phone like a lifeline. I've been investigating Camilla for months, Diana said, her voice low. We weren't just colleagues. We were partners in a side business, until I discovered what she was really doing. Which is what exactly? I demanded, my patience wearing thin. Diana pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen a few times before sliding it across the table to me. This is a credit report in your name from 3 different agencies. Notice anything strange? I scanned the document, my blood running cold. There were credit cards, personal loans, and even a mortgage that I had never applied for. All opened within the last 2 years. All in my name. This can't be right, I whispered, though in my heart, pieces were already falling into place. The missing mail, the strange calls, Camilla's insistence on helping me organize my financial documents after Richard died. It gets worse, Diana said grimly, taking back the tablet and swiping to another screen. The police are executing a search warrant at your son's house right now. Camilla is the target of an investigation into a ring of identity thieves operating across 3 states. She's been doing this for years, marrying into families, gaining their trust, and stealing identities. You're not her first victim, Helena. Just the latest. The cafe seemed to spin around me as Diana's words sank in. Outside the window, in the distance, I could see flashing lights moving in the direction of my son's neighborhood. Marcos, I gasped. My grandchildren, they're still there. They're not in danger, Diana assured me. But Camilla is about to be arrested, and your son's world is about to implode. I thought you deserved to know first, to be prepared. And to be honest, I needed to make sure you weren't involved. Involved? I repeated incredulously. She stole from me. She's been… What? Using my good credit to commit fraud? Diana nodded. Your perfect credit history made you an ideal target. And your situation, a widow with assets but limited family support outside your son, made you vulnerable. Camilla saw an opportunity when she met Marcos 5 years ago. Your son was just a means to an end. My mind reeled with implications. The woman who had been raising my grandchildren, sleeping beside my son for 5 years, was a criminal who had targeted our family deliberately, and I had sensed something was wrong from the beginning, but had dismissed my own instincts, believing that my discomfort was just the natural tension between mother and daughter-in-law. How did you find out? I asked, trying to process everything. I noticed discrepancies in some of our joint business accounts, Diana explained. When I confronted her, she tried to frame me for the missing funds. That's when I started digging deeper and found a pattern. I took what I discovered to the authorities 3 months ago. They've been building a case ever since. My phone rang, startling both of us. Marcos's name flashed on the screen. He's calling, I said unnecessarily, staring at the phone as if it might explode. Answer it, Diana urged. But remember, this investigation is ongoing. Be careful what you say. With a deep breath, I answered. Marcos? My son's voice came through, panicked and confused. Mom, where are you? The police are here. They're saying terrible things about Camilla. They have a warrant. They're searching everything. I closed my eyes, grief washing over me for what my son was about to endure. I'm safe, Marcos. Are the children okay? They're with Barbara in the basement. I told them we're playing a game, hiding from the police cars. His voice broke. Mom, they're saying Camilla has been stealing identities, using people's credit. They mentioned your name. They asked if I helped her access your financial information. You know I would never think that, I said firmly. Where is Camilla now? There was a pause. They took her outside. She's in handcuffs, Mom. She keeps saying it's all a mistake, that she's being framed. Another pause. She said you might be confused about some financial arrangements, that you authorized her to handle things after Dad died. Even now, she was manipulating, laying groundwork to claim I had consented or was confused. The realization ignited something in me, anger that had been dormant for too long. Marcos, listen to me carefully, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I never authorized Camilla to do anything with my finances. If she's been using my name or my credit, it was fraud. Do you understand what I'm saying? Silence stretched between us. Finally he spoke, his voice small in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. I think so. Where are you? I need you here. I'm coming, I promised. Stay with the children. I'll be there as soon as I can. I ended the call and looked up at Diana, who was watching me with something like respect in her eyes. You're stronger than she thought you were, she observed. That's good. You're going to need that strength in the days ahead. I gathered my purse, a new resolve straightening my spine. Thank you for the warning. I should get back to my family. Diana nodded. My contact information is on that card. The detective in charge will want to speak with you. And Helena? She paused until I met her eyes. None of this is your fault. Predators like Camilla are experts at what they do. As I stepped out of the cafe into the humid evening air, police sirens wailed in the distance. The neighborhood I was walking back into would never be the same. My son's marriage was built on lies. My grandchildren's mother was a criminal. My own financial security had been compromised in ways I was just beginning to understand. Yet strangely, I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. The fog of self-doubt that had enveloped me since Richard's death was lifting. I had been right to sense something wrong. My instincts hadn't failed me. I had simply stopped trusting them. I straightened my shoulders and began walking toward the flashing lights, toward my son and grandchildren who needed me now more than ever. The invisible woman was stepping back into view, ready to reclaim her place in her family and her own life, ready to face whatever came next. The walk back to my son's house felt like crossing a threshold between two lives, the one where I had been slowly fading into the background and the one I was about to step into, sharp-edged and demanding. Police cars lined the curb, their lights painting the manicured lawns in alternating red and blue. Neighbors stood in small clusters on their front porches, not even pretending they weren't watching the drama unfold. A young officer stopped me at the edge of the property. "Ma'am, this is an active investigation scene. I'll need you to—" "I'm Helena Daniels. This is my son's home," I said with a firmness that surprised even me. "My grandchildren are inside." His expression shifted. "Mrs. Daniels, Detective Rivera would like to speak with you." He lifted the yellow tape to let me pass. Inside the house, the chaos was controlled but evident. Officers in both uniform and plainclothes moved methodically through rooms I had visited countless times but never felt welcome in. They were boxing files, photographing documents, and bagging electronics. The perfect home that Camilla had curated for her social media followers was being dismantled, its secrets exposed under harsh scrutiny. "Mom!" Marcos appeared from the hallway, his face ashen. He embraced me with a desperation I hadn't felt from him in years. My tall, confident son, suddenly, seemed boyish in his vulnerability. "They won't tell me anything except that Camilla's been arrested. They keep asking about our finances, about your accounts." I held him at arm's length, searching his eyes. "Where are the children?" "Still downstairs with Barbara. She's not doing well. They took Camilla out the back, but Barbara saw it happen." A Latina woman in her 40s approached us, her badge displayed on her belt. "Mrs. Daniels, I'm Detective Rivera. Thank you for coming. I understand this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions." I nodded, still holding on to Marcos's arm. "My grandchildren. They're safe," she assured me. "We have a child specialist with them now, keeping things as normal as possible. Mr. Daniels, would you mind checking on them while I speak with your mother?" Marcos hesitated, clearly torn between staying with me and going to his children. "Go," I urged him. "I'm fine. The children need you right now." After he reluctantly headed downstairs, Detective Rivera led me to the kitchen, Camilla's showpiece room with its marble countertops and high-end appliances that she'd insisted on renovating last year. I wondered now where that money had really come from. "Mrs. Daniels, I understand you received a warning about today's operation," Rivera said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Yes, from Diana Porter." Rivera nodded. "Ms. Porter has been cooperating with our investigation. She made an unauthorized contact with you today, which complicated things, but her intentions were good." "She said Camilla has been stealing my identity," I said, needing to hear confirmation from an official source. "We believe so, yes. We've been tracking a sophisticated identity theft ring operating in Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina. Your daughter-in-law appears to be a key figure." Rivera opened a folder she'd been carrying. "We have evidence of multiple accounts opened in your name over the past 3 years, with estimated fraudulent charges exceeding $150,000. The amount stunned me. "How is that possible? Wouldn't I have been notified? Wouldn't it have affected my credit score?" "The perpetrators were sophisticated. Mail was diverted. Credit monitoring alerts were intercepted. And it appears your daughter-in-law had access to your personal documents." I closed my eyes briefly, remembering how Camilla had offered to organize my paperwork after Richard died, how she'd insisted I Forward my important mail to their house while I was away visiting my sister in Arizona for a month. The small, deliberate steps she'd taken to gain access while seeming helpful. What happens now? I asked. We'll need a full statement from you. Documentation of which accounts are legitimate and which aren't. And I won't sugarcoat it. The process of clearing your name and credit will take time. A commotion from the front of the house drew our attention. Barbara's voice rose above the general murmur, shrill with distress. This is outrageous! My daughter has done nothing wrong! I followed Rivera to the living room, where Barbara stood facing a male detective, her perfectly coiffed silver hair now disheveled, her manicured finger jabbing the air. Mrs. Lowenstein, the detective was saying, we have substantial evidence, fabricated by jealous colleagues. That Diana woman was always envious of Camilla's success. Barbara spotted me and her expression hardened. I should have known you'd be behind this. Barbara, I began, but she cut me off. Camilla told me how you've been getting confused lately, forgetting things, signing papers and then claiming you didn't. She was trying to protect you from yourself, and this is how you repay her? By letting them drag her away in handcuffs? The accusation hit like a physical blow. This was the groundwork Camilla had been laying, painting me as a confused widow, mentally declining, unable to remember what I had authorized. Mrs. Lowenstein, Rivera interjected, we have documented evidence spanning 3 years and multiple victims. This isn't a misunderstanding. Barbara's face crumpled, uncertainty replacing righteous indignation. I want to see my daughter. She's being processed downtown, Rivera explained. You can contact the station in a few hours. Barbara gathered her designer purse, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. As she passed me, she paused. This isn't over. Camilla is a good mother, a good wife. Whatever mistakes she's made, she doesn't deserve this humiliation. After she left, the house seemed quieter despite the continued activity of the officers. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Mom? Marcos appeared with Emma and Lucas trailing behind him, Sophie half asleep in his arms. The children's eyes were wide, confused. Grandma, is Mom in trouble? Emma asked, her voice small. At 12, she was old enough to sense the gravity of the situation. I opened my arms and she came to sit beside me. Your mom is helping the police with some questions, I said carefully. But she was in handcuffs, Lucas pointed out, like the bad guys on TV. Marcos looked at me helplessly over the children's heads, and I saw in his eyes the same question. How do we explain this? Sometimes, I began slowly, grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes that have consequences. The police need to talk to your mom about some mistakes they think she made. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It doesn't change that you're wonderful children. It wasn't enough. How could it be? But it was all I could offer in the moment. Detective Rivera approached us. Mr. Daniels, we're almost finished here. You'll need to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. Mrs. Daniels, I'd like you to come as well. We'll need to go through your financial records in detail. Marcos nodded numbly. After Rivera moved away, he sat heavily beside me, Sophie now fully asleep against his chest. What am I going to do, Mom? How do I tell them their mother might go to prison? The vulnerability in his voice broke my heart. My successful, independent son, who had gradually been pulled away from me by Camilla's subtle manipulations, was now looking to me for guidance again. One day at a time, I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Tonight, we focus on making them feel safe. Tomorrow, we face what comes next. Can you stay? He asked. I don't think I can handle this alone. Of course I'll stay, I assured him, as long as you need me. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The police finally left, taking with them boxes of evidence and leaving behind a home that felt violated, its facade of perfection stripped away. I made dinner for the children from the remains of the barbecue food, while Marcos fielded calls from confused friends who had seen the police cars. By the time we got the children to bed, with extra stories, extra hugs, and reassurances that yes, everything would be okay eventually, it was past midnight. Marcos and I sat at the kitchen island, cups of tea growing cold between us. Tell me everything, he said finally. How did you know to leave before the police came? I explained about the mysterious texts, meeting Diana at the cafe, and what she had told me about Camilla's systematic theft of my identity. Marcos listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "How could I not have seen it?" he whispered. "How could I have been so blind?" "She was careful," I said, "and she was good at what she did. Diana said this wasn't her first time." "What does that mean?" His voice sharpened. "Are you saying our marriage was, what? A con?" I hesitated, not wanting to deepen his pain, but unwilling to shield him from the truth. "Diana implied that Camilla has done this before, that she targets families, particularly ones with vulnerable members, like widows," Marcos supplied, the realization dawning in his eyes. "Like you, after Dad died." I nodded, the truth settling heavily between us. "So everything was a lie? Our whole life together?" His voice cracked. "Did she ever love me at all? The children?" I had no answer for him. The depth of Camilla's deception was still revealing itself, its full dimensions yet unknown. Marcos pressed his palms against his eyes. "I brought her into our family. I gave her access to everything, our home, our lives, your financial information." He looked up at me, anguish etched in his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "No," I said firmly, reaching across to grasp his hands. "You were deceived by someone who has made deception her profession. We all were. But I should have listened when you had concerns about her. I dismissed them as jealousy or overprotectiveness. It was true. There had been moments over the years when I'd expressed unease about Camilla's behavior, her secretiveness, the way she discouraged Marcos from spending time alone with me, her excessive interest in my financial affairs after Richard died. Each time, Marcos had defended her, sometimes gently, sometimes less so. "That's in the past now," I said. "What matters is how we move forward. Together." Marcos squeezed my hands. "Together," he echoed. That night, I slept in the guest room that had never felt like it was meant for me, despite Camilla's insistence that it was Helena's room. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by worries about what tomorrow would bring. Morning arrived with a harsh clarity. Over breakfast, Marcos explained to the children in simple terms that their mother had taken things that didn't belong to her and now had to face the consequences. Emma, perceptive beyond her years, asked if this was why Mom had been so secretive about her office at home, a room, I learned, that the children were strictly forbidden from entering. By 9 o'clock, we were at the police station. The children had been left with a trusted neighbor, one of the few who had offered support rather than gossip. The statement process was grueling. I sat with a financial crimes specialist, going through account after account, identifying which were legitimate and which had been fraudulently opened in my name: credit cards, personal loans, a second mortgage on my home that I had known nothing about. The evidence mounted, page after damning page. "Mrs. Daniels," the specialist said after several hours, "based on what we're seeing, you're a victim of extensive identity theft. But there's good news. Because we can prove fraud, you won't be responsible for these debts." Relief flooded through me. I had been silently calculating the damage, wondering if my comfortable retirement was now a pipe dream, if I would need to sell my home to cover debts I hadn't incurred. "How long will it take to clear my name?" I asked. "Months, possibly," she admitted, "but we'll help guide you through the process." In another room, Marcos was giving his own statement. When we finally reunited in the station lobby, his face was drawn and pale. "Camilla refused to see me," he said hollowly. "Her lawyer advised against it." I put my arm around his waist, this son who towered over me physically but seemed so diminished now. "Give it time." Detective Rivera met us as we were preparing to leave. "We've executed a search warrant on a storage unit rented under an alias we've connected to your wife," she told Marcos. "We found significant evidence there. Financial documents, credit cards, mail belonging to multiple victims. And something else you should know." She hesitated, glancing between us. "What is it?" Marcos pressed. "We found documentation suggesting that Camilla Nelson isn't her real name. We believe she's been operating under various identities for at least the past decade." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Not even her name was real. "Then who is she?" Marcos asked, his voice barely audible. "We're still working to establish that," Rivera said. "But Mr. Daniels, it appears she's been married at least twice before," under different names. Both marriages ended when her fraudulent activities were discovered, or about to be discovered. I watched the last remnants of Marcos's world collapse. The wife he'd loved, the mother of his children, was a phantom, a constructed identity designed to gain access to our family and our assets. On the drive home, Marcos was silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I didn't push him to talk, recognizing the need to process this staggering betrayal. It wasn't until we were parked in his driveway that he spoke. "The children," he said. "They're hers biologically. But who is she? What does that make them?" "They're yours," I said firmly. "They're Daniels's. They're our family. Nothing changes that." He nodded slowly, seeming to draw strength from the certainty in my voice. "Thank you for being here, Mom. I don't know how I would face this without you." As we walked to the front door, I noticed several cars parked across the street, news vans. Word had gotten out. The perfect family in the perfect house was now a scandal, a cautionary tale for the evening news. "Don't engage," I advised, steering Marcos toward the door. "They'll lose interest eventually." Inside, the neighbor reported that the children had been asking for their mother. Emma had been checking the news on her tablet, finding fragmented information about the arrest. The outside world was already intruding, bringing questions we weren't prepared to answer. That evening, after another difficult round of explanations and reassurances to the children, my phone rang. It was Diana Porter. "I've been questioned for hours," she said without preamble. "They're not happy I warned you, but I don't regret it. You deserve to be prepared." "Thank you," I said sincerely, "for everything you've done." "There's more you should know," Diana continued. "The police have only scratched the surface. Camilla, or whatever her real name is, has been running this scheme for years. She's part of a network. They target specific types of families, share information, create elaborate backstories." My skin crawled at the thought of Camilla, this stranger, discussing our family with other criminals, identifying us as marks. "How did you discover all this?" "When I first became suspicious, I hired a private investigator. He found connections to similar cases in other states. The same MO, marriage to a target with access to substantial assets, particularly one with a vulnerable family member like an elderly parent or a recent widow." "Like me," I said softly. "Like you," Diana confirmed. "Helena, I'm sorry to be blunt, but you need to understand the scope of this. Camilla never loved your son. She never loved those children. They were props in her performance, her way of establishing legitimacy and gaining your family's trust. The cruelty of it took my breath away. To use children, her own children, as tools in a criminal enterprise. What kind of person could do that?" "Does Marcos know this?" Diana asked. "Some of it, not all." I glanced toward the living room, where my son sat staring blankly at financial documents spread across the coffee table. "He's still processing. The police will reveal more tomorrow. They've connected her to at least 3 other identities, 3 other families. I thought you should hear it from someone who cares, not from a police report." After we hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen, contemplating how much to share with Marcos now, and how much to shield him from until he was stronger. The protectiveness I felt was instinctive, the mother bear guarding her cub from further harm. But Marcos wasn't a cub anymore. He was a grown man facing the wreckage of his life, and he deserved the truth, however painful. I found him still among the papers, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. "That was Diana," I said, sitting beside him. "There's more we need to discuss." He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw a new resolve forming, a determination born of betrayal, but reaching toward something beyond it, toward truth, toward healing. "Tell me everything," he said. "No more secrets in this family. Not ever again." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of police interviews, financial investigations, and the constant struggle to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the children. I moved temporarily into Marcos's guest room, which no longer felt like an alien territory, but a necessary outpost in this new battle we were fighting together. Each morning brought new revelations, each more devastating than the last. Camilla's real name, we learned, was Elise Montero, though even that was suspect, as she had used at least 5 different identities over the past 12 years. The network she belonged to specialized in long-term identity theft, targeting affluent families, particularly those with elderly members or recent widows. It's a form of confidence scheme called the long game, Detective Rivera explained during one of our many meetings at the station. The perpetrators invest years cultivating relationships, creating legitimate-seeming lives, even having children to solidify their cover. Having children as a cover, Marcos repeated hollowly. My children exist because they made her seem more trustworthy. The thought was almost too painful to contemplate. Emma, Lucas, and Sophie, bright, beautiful children I loved with every fiber of my being, had been conceived as props in an elaborate fraud. Yet they were innocent, unwitting participants in their mother's scheme. They were also victims, perhaps the greatest victims of all. A week after the arrest, Barbara Lowenstein appeared at Marcos's door, her perfect composure now permanently fractured. The police had questioned her extensively, ultimately concluding that while she had benefited from her daughter's crimes through gifts and travel, she hadn't been knowingly complicit. I need to see my grandchildren, she demanded, standing rigid on the porch. Marcos hesitated. Barbara, this isn't a good time. When will it be a good time? When their mother is sentenced to prison? When they've forgotten who I am? Her voice cracked. They're all I have left of her. I stepped forward from where I'd been listening in the hallway. They're not of her, Barbara. They're themselves. Whole people with their own identities, not extensions of Camilla. Barbara's eyes narrowed when she saw me. Still here, I see. Enjoying your new position as the injured party? The wronged grandmother swooping in to save the day? The accusation stung, but I refused to let it show. The children need stability right now. I'm here to help provide that. And I'm not? She challenged. Marcos intervened, his voice firm but gentle. Barbara, the children are confused enough. They know their mother is in trouble, but they don't understand why. Having you here, defending Camilla when we're trying to help them process the truth, it would only make things harder. The truth? Barbara laughed bitterly. Your version of the truth, you mean. Has it occurred to you that there might be explanations beyond what the police are saying? That Camilla might have been coerced or made mistakes under pressure? We've seen the evidence, I said quietly. All of it. There's no ambiguity here. Barbara's shoulders sagged slightly, the first crack in her defensive armor. I raised her alone, you know. Worked 2 jobs to give her everything. She was always special, different, smarter than everyone else but never quite fitting in. I thought when she met you, she looked at Marcos, that she'd finally found where she belonged. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for this woman who had been as thoroughly deceived as the rest of us. The daughter she thought she knew had never existed. At least Marcos had the children, living embodiments of something real that had emerged from the deception. They ask about you, I admitted, softening my approach. Especially Sophie. She wanted to know if Grandma B still loves her, even though Mommy did bad things. Barbara's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the pain that flashed across her face. Of course I still love them. They're innocent in all this. Then we need to agree on how to support them together, Marcos said. But that means accepting the reality of what Camilla did, not defending her actions to them or suggesting this is all a misunderstanding. Barbara hesitated, visibly torn between loyalty to her daughter and love for her grandchildren. Finally, she nodded. I can try. For their sakes. It was a small victory, an uneasy truce in what could have become another battlefront. Marcos arranged for Barbara to visit the following weekend, with the understanding that she wouldn't discuss Camila's case with the children or make promises about their mother's return. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcos and I sat on the back porch, the summer heat finally giving way to a more merciful evening breeze. The yard was still dotted with abandoned toys from that fateful barbecue, now seeming like artifacts from another life entirely. I met with the divorce attorney today, Marcos said, breaking our comfortable silence. He says given the circumstances, it should be straightforward. No contest. That's something, at least, I offered. He also thinks I'll get full custody. Her lawyer has already indicated she won't fight it. He twisted his wedding ring absently, a habit he'd developed in recent days. What kind of mother doesn't fight for her children? The question hung in the air between us, unanswerable in any way that wouldn't deepen his pain. The kind who never wanted to be a mother in the first place, he answered himself. Just a role she played, a means to an end. I reached for his hand, stilling the nervous movement. The children know you love them. That's what matters now. Do they? Or do they think I was complicit somehow? That I knew what she was doing? The fear in his voice was palpable. Emma asked me yesterday if I helped Mommy steal things. How do I convince them I was as deceived as everyone else? Through consistency, I said firmly. Through showing up every day and being honest with them in age-appropriate ways. They're smart, Marcos. They'll understand eventually. He nodded, though uncertainty still shadowed his eyes. I need to go back to work next week. The leave of absence is almost up, and frankly, we need the income now more than ever. With Camilla's assets frozen and the extent of the financial damage still being assessed, Marcos's family had taken a significant hit. The lifestyle they had enjoyed, which I now understood had been partially funded through fraudulent means, was no longer sustainable. I can stay with the children, I offered immediately, for as long as you need. Gratitude washed over his face. You've already done so much, Mom. Your own life is on hold while you're helping us. I almost laughed at the irony. What life, Marcos? For 3 years I've been drifting, going through the motions. This, I gestured to encompass the house, the situation, all of it. As terrible as it is, has reminded me what it means to be needed, to have purpose. The truth of it resonated through me as I spoke. Since Richard's death, I had retreated from life in small increments, declining social invitations, neglecting friendships, even letting my garden, once my pride and joy, become overgrown and neglected. I had been disappearing by degrees, and Camilla had recognized that vulnerability, exploited it for her own gain. I failed you, Marcos said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. After Dad died, I should have been there more. Instead, I let her push you to the margins of our lives. We both made mistakes, I acknowledged. I withdrew when I should have reached out, but that's in the past now. A notification chimed on Marcos's phone, another email from the detective handling the case. They were coming daily now, each revealing new facets of Camilla's deception. They found another storage unit, he said after scanning the message. This one in Maryland. More documents, more evidence of other victims. He set the phone down, rubbing his eyes wearily. How did I live with her for 5 years and never suspect? It was the question he returned to repeatedly, torturing himself with what he perceived as his own blindness. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Camilla had been exceptionally good at her job. Her job had been deception. The next morning, I received a call from Diana Porter asking to meet. We arranged to rendezvous at the same cafe where she had first revealed Camilla's true nature to me. It felt like years had passed since that day, though it had been barely 2 weeks. Diana looked more relaxed than the last time I'd seen her, the tension of carrying dangerous secrets now lifted from her shoulders. How are you holding up? She asked as I slid into the booth across from her. One day at a time, I replied honestly. The children have good days and bad. Marcos, too. She nodded sympathetically. And you? How are you processing all this? The question caught me off guard. Everyone had been so focused on Marcos and the children that few had asked how I was coping with the knowledge that I had been systematically targeted and robbed by my own daughter-in-law. I'm angry, I admitted after a moment. Not just about the money or the credit fraud, but about the time. The years she stole from me with my son, my grandchildren, making me doubt myself, question my own perceptions. Gaslighting, Diana supplied. It's a common tactic with these types of criminals. They make you question your own reality. Well, it worked, I said bitterly. I started to believe I was becoming forgetful, confused, that maybe I had authorized some of those accounts and just couldn't remember. Diana leaned forward. Helena, I asked you here because there's something I think you should know. Something that wasn't in the police reports. My stomach tightened. What is it? Before I went to the authorities, I confronted Camilla with what I'd discovered. She tried to buy my silence. Diana pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times before sliding it across to me. This is a recording of that conversation. The police have it now, but I thought you deserved to hear it directly. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the play button. Is it bad? Diana's expression was answer enough. It shows who she really is. Who she's always been. With a deep breath, I pressed play. Camilla's voice, the voice I had heard at countless family dinners, the voice that had read bedtime stories to my grandchildren, filled the space between us. "So what exactly do you think you know, Diana?" Her tone was cold, calculating. Nothing like the warm, slightly harried mother I thought I knew. Diana's voice replied, "Everything, Elise. Or do you prefer Camilla these days? I know about the accounts you've opened in Helena's name, the mortgage on her house, the credit cards, all of it." A pause, then a laugh. A chilling sound, utterly devoid of warmth. "And what do you plan to do with this information?" "The right thing. Go to the police. Before you make that noble but misguided choice, consider this: $50,000. Cash. Yours for simply minding your own business." "You think you can buy me off?" "Everyone has a price, Diana. What's yours? 100,000? That sad old woman isn't worth ruining both our lives over." My breath caught at the casual cruelty in her voice. Sad old woman. Was that how she had seen me all along? A pathetic mark to be exploited and discarded? "What about your husband? Your children?" Diana asked on the recording. "Are they just collateral damage in your schemes?" Another cold laugh. Marcos served his purpose. He gave me access to his mother's assets, a respectable cover, and legitimate children to complete the picture. But 5 years in one identity is pushing it. I was already planning my exit strategy when you started snooping. "Exit strategy?" Diana's voice was incredulous. "You were going to abandon your own children?" "They would have been provided for. Marcos is a devoted father, if rather dull. And it's not like I would have disappeared entirely, just relocated with a new identity, perhaps become the distant aunt who visits occasionally. Children are resilient. They adapt." I stopped the recording, unable to bear any more. The casual way she discussed discarding her family, my son, my grandchildren, as if they were props in a play that had run its course, made my blood run cold. "I'm sorry," Diana said softly. "I know it's painful. But I thought you needed to hear the truth, unfiltered, unmitigated by police reports or legal language." I nodded, pushing the phone back toward her. "Thank you. As horrible as it is, it helps. Confirms what we've been learning piece by piece." "There's one more thing," Diana said, hesitating. "Something I didn't tell the police because I couldn't prove it. Camilla once hinted to me when she was drinking that she'd done this before, that she'd left other families, other children behind. The implications sent a chill through me. You mean my grandchildren might have half-siblings somewhere? Other children she abandoned? It's possible. The police are still trying to piece together her past identities, her previous targets." I sat back, absorbing this new dimension of horror. If true, it meant there were other children out there who had been abandoned by the same woman, other families shattered by her calculated deceptions. "Will you tell Marcos?" Diana asked. "Not yet," I decided. "He's dealing with enough right now. If the police find evidence of other children, we'll cross that bridge then." As I drove home from the cafe, the weight of everything we had learned pressed down on me. But alongside the anger and grief, I felt something else stirring, a fierce determination. Camilla, Elise, whatever her name was, had underestimated me, had dismissed me as a sad old woman, easy prey for her schemes. She had been wrong. The woman who had raised a son alone after being widowed too young, who had helped build a successful accounting business from nothing, who had weathered loss and grief and emerged intact. That woman was not defeated. She was awake now, alert to the battle that still lay ahead. The house was quiet when I arrived, the children at their summer day camp, a normalcy we'd insisted on maintaining despite everything. Marcos was in his home office, on a conference call with his law firm, negotiating his return to work. I moved through the rooms that had once intimidated me with their perfect styling and now felt like a stage set, beautiful but hollow. In Camilla's home office, now sealed with police tape, I paused. Behind that door were the remnants of her operation, the evidence of how systematically she had targeted and exploited my family. My phone rang, Detective Rivera calling with an update. "Mrs. Daniels, we've made progress freezing the fraudulent accounts. The credit agencies have been notified, and the fraud alerts are in place. It will take time, but your credit will be restored." "Thank you," I said. "And the criminal case?" "Moving forward. The district attorney is preparing charges: identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, mail fraud. Given the interstate nature of the crimes, federal charges are likely as well. Ms. Montero is facing significant prison time. Has she said anything about why? About why she chose us? The question had been haunting me. Rivera hesitated. She hasn't been cooperative. But in cases like this, the target selection is rarely personal. It's about opportunity and vulnerability. Your late husband's death, your substantial assets, your son's position, these made your family an attractive mark. After we hung up, I stood in the hallway, absorbing her words. Not personal, just business. Cold, calculated business. Somehow that made it worse. To know that the havoc wreaked on our lives, the bonds broken and trust shattered, had been nothing more than a transaction to Camilla. We hadn't even been people to her, just marks. I heard Marcos end his call and went to find him. He looked exhausted, but more focused than he had in days. "I'm going back next Monday," he said. "Part-time at first, working mostly from home. The firm's been surprisingly understanding." "That's good," I said, sitting across from him. "A step toward normalcy." He nodded, then fixed me with a searching look. "Mom, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, something that's been bothering me." "What is it?" "All those times you tried to tell me something felt off about Camilla. What did you see that I missed? What signs did I ignore?" It was a loaded question, one I'd been careful to avoid in the aftermath of Camilla's arrest. The last thing I wanted was to pile guilt onto Marcos's already burdened shoulders. But he deserved honesty. "Small things," I said carefully. The way she would redirect conversations when they turned to her past. How she never had old friends visit, just new ones who knew the same version of her that we did. The inconsistencies in stories about her childhood. "I remember you asking about those," Marcos acknowledged. "I thought you were being nitpicky. And the way she isolated you, subtly, gradually, from me, from your old friends. The constant monitoring of your communications, always knowing where you were and who you were with." He winced. "I thought she was just attentive, interested in my life. That's what she wanted you to think. That's what made her so effective." I reached for his hand. "Marcos, even professionals get taken in by people like her. You fell in love with the person she pretended to be. There's no shame in that. There is when I chose her over you," he said quietly. "When I let her push you away because it was easier than standing up to her." The admission hung between us, raw and honest. For the first time since this ordeal began, we were acknowledging not just Camilla's deception, but the ways our own family dynamics had enabled it. "We can't change the past," I said finally, "but we can learn from it, build something stronger." He squeezed my hand. "I'd like that. The children need you in their lives. Really in their lives, not just for holidays and occasional visits. I need you too." The words warmed something in me that had been cold for too long. For years, I had been receding into the background of my own family, accepting the diminished role Camilla had carefully crafted for me. No more. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. "Whatever comes next, we face it as a family." Outside, the summer sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Soon the children would return from camp, full of stories and energy. Tomorrow would bring more challenges: legal meetings, financial discussions, difficult conversations with Emma, Lucas, and Sophie about their mother. But for now, in this moment of connection with my son, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the fragile hope of someone waiting for things to improve, but the solid, grounded hope of someone actively reclaiming her place in the world. The invisible woman was stepping back into the light. 6 months passed, each day a step toward healing, though the path was neither straight nor easy. Fall gave way to winter, and the holidays approached. Our first without Camilla, the first since our family had been shattered and begun the painstaking process of reassembling itself into something new. The legal machinery ground forward with agonizing slowness. Camilla, or Elise Montero, as she was now officially known in court documents, remained in custody, denied bail due to the extensive nature of her crimes and the high flight risk she presented. The evidence against her had grown more damning with each passing week as investigators uncovered the full scope of her operation. 3 previous identities confirmed, Detective Rivera told us during one of our regular updates. 3 previous marriages, all to targets with similar profiles. And 2 other children that we know of, both left behind when she moved on to new identities. The revelation had hit Marcos like a physical blow. My children have siblings? Half-siblings they've never met? In California and Minnesota, Rivera confirmed. Ages 12 and 8, both living with their fathers, much like your situation. I had watched my son absorb this information, his face a study in conflicting emotions, horror at this new dimension of Camilla's betrayal, but also a strange comfort in knowing his children weren't the only ones, that there were others who had experienced the same abandonment, the same lies. Would it be possible to contact them? The other fathers, I mean. His voice had been hesitant, vulnerable. Rivera had nodded. If you're interested, I can facilitate that. Some of the other victims have expressed interest in connecting as well. There's talk of forming a support network. And so another chapter had begun. Tentative communications with men who had walked the same devastating path as my son, who understood as no one else could what it meant to discover your entire family life had been an elaborate fraud. Men who were raising children whose mother had seen them as nothing more than props in her criminal enterprise. Michael in San Diego had a daughter, Lily, just 2 years older than Emma. Jason in Minneapolis had a son, Ethan, between Lucas and Sophie in age. Both men had been professionals with good incomes and aging parents. The same profile as our family. Both had been left financially devastated. Both were rebuilding. The conversations had started via email, then progressed to video calls. First just the adults, then cautiously including the children. Watching my grandchildren discover they had half-siblings was both heartbreaking and healing. The older children, Emma and Lily, had immediately formed a bond, exchanging messages daily, finding solace in their shared experience. "Do you think she ever loved us at all?" Emma had asked Lily during one of their calls. A question too painful for the adults to address, but natural between sisters navigating the same wounded landscape. "I think she loved what we gave her," Lily had answered with the wisdom of her 14 years. "A cover story, respectability, but that's not the same as loving us for who we are." I had watched Emma absorb this harsh truth, seen her straighten her shoulders slightly. "We have each other now, though, and our dads, and our grandmas." It wasn't enough. Nothing could fully heal the wound of such fundamental maternal rejection, but it was something. A fragile network of connection forming across the broken terrain of Camilla's deceptions. Financially, we were slowly recovering. The fraudulent accounts in my name had been closed, the debts discharged as the product of identity theft. My credit score, which had plummeted when the truth first emerged, was gradually climbing back to its former sterling status. The second mortgage Camilla had taken out on my home had been invalidated, though the legal process to completely clear the title was still ongoing. Marcos had returned to work full-time by November, his law firm having weathered the initial scandal. The story had made national news briefly. Attorney's wife in multi-state identity theft ring. But the media attention had eventually faded, seeking fresher scandals to exploit. He had sold the too-large house with its painful memories and moved with the children to a comfortable condo closer to my home. I had moved in with them temporarily during the transition, then returned to my own house, but with a new routine that kept me deeply involved in their daily lives. School drop-offs on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Friday night dinners at my place, weekend sleepovers that had become a cherished tradition. The distance that Camilla had so carefully cultivated between me and my son, between me and my grandchildren, had collapsed. In its absence, we were rediscovering each other, building relationships untainted by her manipulations. It was a Wednesday afternoon in December when the call came from Detective Rivera. I was at Marcos's condo, helping the children decorate their Christmas tree, a smaller one than in previous years, but somehow more meaningful in its modest authenticity. "The plea deal has been accepted," Rivera informed us. 20 years federal time, additional state charges to run concurrently. No possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Marcos had sat heavily on the couch, the ornament he'd been holding dangling forgotten from his fingers. 20 years, he repeated. The children will be adults by the time she's eligible for release. That's if she gets parole at the first opportunity, which is unlikely given the extent of her crimes, Rivera added. There are also pending charges in other jurisdictions that could extend her sentence. After the call ended, Marcos and I had exchanged a long look over the children's heads as they continued decorating, blissfully unaware of this latest development. We had agreed weeks ago that they didn't need to know every detail of their mother's case, only what directly affected them. We'll tell them after dinner, he decided, together. That evening, we had sat the children down and explained in simple terms that their mother had accepted responsibility for her crimes and would be in prison for a very long time. Emma, at 12, had asked the most questions, her analytical mind trying to make sense of timeframes and consequences. Lucas had been quiet, his 9-year-old face solemn but composed. Only 6-year-old Sophie had cried, not fully understanding but sensing the finality in our voices. "Can we still write to her?" Emma had asked. "Send pictures?" The children had maintained sporadic communication with Camilla during her pretrial detention. Cards at birthdays, drawings from Sophie, the occasional monitored phone call. It was a complex balance, allowing them to process their relationship with their mother on their own terms while protecting them from further manipulation. "If you want to," Marcos had assured them, "that's entirely up to each of you." "I don't think I want to anymore," Lucas had said quietly. "She doesn't feel like my mom now." His simple statement had brought tears to my eyes. Out of the mouths of babes, the truth that the adults had been tiptoeing around. The woman who had given birth to these children, who had raised them for years, had never truly been their mother in the ways that mattered most. She had performed motherhood as part of her cover, her true motives hidden behind bedtime stories and packed lunches. The holiday season unfolded with a bittersweet quality, moments of genuine joy punctuated by the children's occasional questions or periods of quiet sadness. Barbara joined us for Christmas dinner, her relationship with the children having stabilized into something more authentic than before. She had stopped defending Camilla, stopped suggesting there might be mitigating circumstances for her daughter's actions. The evidence had become too overwhelming to deny. "I keep wondering where I went wrong," she confided to me as we washed dishes after dinner, the children and Marcos in the living room setting up a new board game. "What did I miss when she was growing up? Were there signs?" "You can't blame yourself," I said, though I understood the impulse all too well. "Some people are just wired differently. They see others as tools, not as people." Barbara nodded slowly, her hands mechanically drying a plate. "The irony is, I always thought you were the problem, that you were the possessive mother-in-law trying to come between Camilla and Marcos. She encouraged that perception, you know." "I know," I said simply. It wasn't news to me that Camilla had deliberately driven wedges between family members, isolating her targets to make them more vulnerable. "I'm sorry," Barbara said, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "For believing her over you. For all the times I was cold or dismissive." The apology caught me off guard. Barbara and I had reached a tentative truce for the sake of the children, but we had never directly addressed the tensions of the past. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "They're lucky to have you," she added, nodding toward the living room where my son and grandchildren's laughter could be heard. I wasn't the most involved grandmother. Camilla kept me at a distance too, though I didn't see it then. "It's not too late," I offered. "They need all the love and stability they can get right now." Something shifted between us in that moment. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual recognition of our shared purpose, our commitment to the children, caught in the crossfire of Camilla's deceptions. New Year's Eve arrived, and with it, a sense of cautious optimism. Marcos had invited a few close friends over, colleagues who had stood by him through the scandal, neighbors who had offered support rather than gossip. The children were allowed to stay up late, though Sophie was already nodding off on the couch by 10 o'clock. As midnight approached, I found myself on the balcony of the condo, watching the city lights sparkle against the winter sky. Marcos joined me, handing me a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his glass gently against mine. "New beginnings," I echoed, "and hard-won wisdom." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the muffled sounds of laughter and conversation drifting from inside. "I got a letter today," Marcos said finally, "from the Minnesota dad, Jason. He's bringing Ethan to visit during spring break. Thought it would be good for the kids to meet in person." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. The budding relationships between these half-siblings was something precious emerging from the wreckage, connections that might never have formed without the collapse of Camilla's house of cards. Michael and Lily might come too, if he can get the time off work. Marcos took a sip of his champagne, then added, "It's strange, isn't it? Finding family through something so terrible. Family takes many forms," I observed. "Sometimes the ones we choose, or the ones formed through shared experience, are as meaningful as those we're born into." He nodded thoughtfully. "The therapist says the children are doing remarkably well, all things considered. Emma, especially. She's showing a resilience I hadn't expected. She takes after her father," I said, squeezing his arm affectionately, "and her grandmother." Marcos smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it rarely had in recent months. "Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask you something. The lease on this place is up in June. I've been thinking, what would you say to us looking for a duplex? Something with 2 separate but connected living spaces." The suggestion took me by surprise. "You mean, for us to live together?" "Not exactly together. We'd each have our own space, privacy, but connected, for the kids to move freely between. For convenience, for family." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Unless you think it's a terrible idea. I know you value your independence." "I think it's a wonderful idea," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "The best I've heard in a long time." Relief washed over his face. "Really? You wouldn't mind? Mind being an everyday part of my grandchildren's lives? Mind having my son close enough to share coffee in the morning or help with homework in the evening? Why would I mind that?" He laughed softly. "When you put it that way." His expression grew serious again. "She took so much from us, Mom. So many years when we could have been closer. When you could have been more present in the kids' lives. I don't want to waste any more time." I thought of all the family dinners I had attended, but never quite felt part of. The school events where I had been seated in the back row while Camilla's friends got the prime spots. The subtle ways I had been positioned as peripheral, as less important. "Neither do I agreed. From inside came the sound of the television being turned up, the New Year's countdown beginning. We rejoined the others just as the final seconds of the old year ticked away. 10, 9, 8, the children chanted along with the crowd on the screen, their faces alight with anticipation. As the countdown reached 0 and cheers erupted, I found myself in the center of a group hug. Marcos, Emma, Lucas, and a sleepy Sophie, who had rallied for the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't on the edges of the celebration, wasn't the afterthought invited out of obligation. I was essential, central, truly present. The winter continued, bringing snow flurries and school projects, violin recitals and basketball games. I attended them all, no longer the grandmother who needed to be accommodated, but an integral part of the support system that kept the children grounded and secure. In February, we began looking at properties together, Marcos and I, with the children offering their enthusiastic opinions on each potential home. We finally found it in March, a craftsman-style duplex in a neighborhood with good schools, walking distance to a park. The renovation plans would connect the 2 units with a shared family room while maintaining separate living quarters. A perfect balance of togetherness and independence. As winter reluctantly gave way to spring, I found myself in my garden one sunny afternoon, clearing away dead leaves and preparing the soil for new planting. My garden had been neglected in the years after Richard's death, my enthusiasm for nurturing growing things having withered along with my sense of purpose. Now I found myself eager to revive it, to create something beautiful again. Emma was helping me, her capable hands working alongside mine, asking questions about each plant and seed with genuine curiosity. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "do you think people can change? Really change, I mean." I knew the question wasn't about gardening. "Some can," I said carefully, "if they want to badly enough, if they recognize that they need to." She nodded, digesting this. "Mom's therapist says she has something called antisocial personality disorder, that she doesn't feel empathy like normal people do." I hadn't realized Emma was seeing a therapist specifically to discuss Camilla. It was a good sign, Marcos ensuring his children had the support they needed to process their mother's true nature. "That's often the case with people who can do what your mother did," I acknowledged. "They don't connect emotionally to others the way most people do." So she probably can't change then, Emma concluded, even if she wanted to. It would be very difficult, I agreed, not wanting to offer false hope, but also not wanting to completely devastate her. But that doesn't reflect on you, Emma. You are your own person, with your own capacity for empathy and love. You're nothing like her in that way. She seemed relieved at this reassurance. Dad says I'm like you, that I have your strength. Pride and love welled up within me. You're stronger than I ever was at your age, or any age for that matter. Emma smiled, returning to her work with renewed vigor. After a moment, she added, I'm glad you're moving in next door to us. It feels right, like how a family should be. Me too, sweetheart, I said, blinking back unexpected tears. Me too. Later that evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, my phone rang. It was Diana Porter, checking in as she did periodically. The closing is set for next month, I told her excitedly. The contractors think we can move in by August, before the new school year. That's wonderful news, Helena, she said warmly. You sound happy. I am, I realized, somewhat surprised by the simple truth of it. Despite everything, I am. You've come a long way from that terrified woman who met me in the cafe last summer, Diana observed. The one who had just discovered her daughter-in-law was a criminal mastermind. I laughed softly at her characterization. I suppose I have. We all have. After we hung up, I sat reflecting on the journey of the past months. The pain hadn't disappeared. It probably never would entirely. The children would always carry the wound of their mother's betrayal. Marcos would always bear the scars of having loved someone who had only pretended to love him in return. But alongside the pain, something new had flowered. A family reconfigured, stronger in some ways for having been broken and mended. Connections that Camilla had deliberately weakened had been fortified. New relationships had formed across the miles with others who shared our experience. And I had reclaimed my place, not just in my family, but in my own life. The invisible woman, the sad old widow that Camilla had dismissed as an easy mark, had proven far more resilient than anyone had anticipated, far stronger than I myself had believed. The sun dipped below the horizon, streaking the sky with final blazes of color before surrendering to twilight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of both grief and joy. The journey wasn't over. Recovery never followed a neat, linear path. But as I watched day give way to night, I felt a profound certainty that we would continue moving forward together. The family Camilla had targeted because of its perceived vulnerabilities had not only survived her predations, but emerged more closely bonded, more deeply connected than before. In trying to exploit what she saw as our weakness, she had inadvertently revealed our greatest strength, the capacity to rebuild, to forgive, to love authentically in a way she could never comprehend. And in that, ironically, was our ultimate victory over her deception. I stood and went inside, closing the door on the gathering darkness, moving toward the warmth of my home, the home that would soon be part of a larger whole, a sanctuary not just for me, but for the family that had found its way back to each other after nearly being destroyed. The sad old woman was gone. In her place stood someone who had reclaimed her power, her voice, her central place in the narrative of her own life. Someone who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but undimmed. Someone who knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, she would face it with clear eyes and an open heart, surrounded by the family that was hers once more. If my story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it's never too late to reclaim your place. Leave a comment below telling me which part of Helena's journey moved you the most.